Okay, good afternoon. So we are going to structure this. Today's tutorial is going to be structured a little bit differently from what we've done in the past. I'm going to be combining a couple of things. The first thing that we're going to be doing is, not first, but like this is the thing that we are doing. We're going to be working through a problem that is structured similarly to how the problems that you're going to be dealing with on the final will be structured. So in the interest of giving you sort of a fair shake at having the conversation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the problem up in the chat so that you have it. And then I'm going to send you into breakout rooms to talk in small groups for 10 minutes. And then we're going to come back and we're going to talk through the problem together. But I want to give you guys a chance before we start like trying to work through this to try and like piece this together without me being present, so that you guys can figure that out. Okay, so this is how we're going to start. Let me put the problem in the chat. Okay, there's a little bit more, so let me. Okay. So Tom was the fee simple owner of Firefly, a beachfront villa. The villa also houses a bed and breakfast for tourists. In 2010, he told his niece Catherine that she could live with him at Firefly rent-free for as long as she desired, provided she assisted him with the cooking for the tourists and did the necessary repairs for the villa. Tom explained to Catherine that he was unable to pay her as much as she earned in her previous job. Catherine gave up her job as a live-in helper, which paid very well, and moved into Firefly. Catherine was afraid of burglars, so she installed a high-tech security system at Firefly. Tom was present when Catherine had the security system installed. Catherine also installed new windows to the guest rooms at Firefly because the old windows were damaged in a storm in 2013. The installation was very costly. Catherine had discussed these repairs with Tom before repairing the windows, and at that time, Tom told her to go ahead. Tom sells the Firefly to Jim, and Jim has served Catherine with a notice to quit Firefly. Advise Catherine. Okay, so the first trick in these questions, just before I break you guys up, the first trick is to figure out what the issues are. Once you know what the issues are, then you can start to ask the question, okay, how do we resolve these issues? Okay, but the first step is to find out what the issues are. So I'm going to break you guys up into small groups and send you out into breakout rooms for 10 minutes, and then we're going to reconvene and meet as a class. All right, so Okay, great. Thanks for doing that for me. So let's get started by asking this question. What is the most important issue for Catherine as she arrives looking for advice? Let's, so put yourself in, okay, right? That's something for her to be concerned about, but think about it like this, right? Let's put ourselves in Catherine's shoes, okay? And ask, you know, if our uncle had just come along and sold the house we lived in out from under us, and the new owner had told us to move out, what would we be concerned with? Alika, go ahead.
Wouldn't the first thing that we'd have to establish would be her rights? Um, in this situation, whether she's a tenant, a licensee, or
I mean,
etc.
you are absolutely right. Okay. The first and most important issue for Catherine is, where am I going to live? Okay. Now, in the real world, the practical, sort of world, Catherine is likely to be asking the question, where am I going to move to? But on a property law exam, we can ask the question, well, why can't you stay where you are, right? And we can analyze it sort of through that lens. But the key piece of this is that the first question that we have to answer is, where shall she go? What shall she do? Okay. And the correct answer is not, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. Sorry. My mother has loved Gone with the Wind for her entire life, and so I know it far better than I should. Anyway, so the first question, right, is exactly what Alika says. Is Catherine a tenant? Is she a licensee? What rights does she have at law? Okay. So, Alika, you get the first bite at the apple. What do you think are her rights?
Sir, well, looking at it, the uncle had invited her to come and live on the beachfront villa for rent free, but she had to still, there were conditions attached to it. So like she still had to cook and do necessary repairs. So I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but when I was looking at that she installed these high-tech security system, that didn't go under the condition. The windows, however, went under the condition, but not the security system.
Well, I think you are jumping ahead in that we still don't know what kinds of rights she has yet, right? So the first question has to be, what is this relationship between Tom and Catherine over the Firefly?
Sir, it seems, can I speak, sir?
Yeah, go ahead.
It is clearly it's a business relationship, because she has to perform tasks which are income earners, like cooking, and also carrying out repairs to the villa. So she's not a licensee, because a licensee would just have permission to occupy the premises.
Well,
Uh,
think about it though. Let's think about that though, because do all licensees just receive a gratuitous permission?
Maybe not.
Right? So there are licensees who like pay for their permission, right? They give something in exchange.
Right, nominal, not a set price, but something nominal. All right.
Or possibly a set price, right? Because if you think about it, country club dues are, your country club membership is a license. It's permission to enter the land.
Yes, yes,
And you
you're
may
right.
pay a very substantial amount in order to receive that license.
It is true.
So, I don't think we can sort of categorize this based on the economics of the relationship. We have to categorize it based on the law.
On the law, yes.
And so what are the legal components of the relationship? So let me ask the question a little bit differently. Is there anything in this fact pattern that would suggest to you that the relationship between Tom and Catherine meets the requirements of the statute of frauds? So in case you don't remember, because it may not have been mentioned enough times, the statute of frauds is the old 1190 Act that provides that all contracts for interests in land must be in writing. So do we have anything that would satisfy the statute of frauds between Tom and Catherine?
Sir, could you please repeat about the statute of frauds again?
Sure.
So,
The statute of frauds says that in order to actually convey land, every conveyance of land must be in writing. You can't convey land with your mouth. So if there's an interest in land, there has to be a writing.
well, I would say in this case, then she doesn't have an interest because there was nothing set in writing. Just
Right. No writing, no interest, which means that she can't own the property, and it means she can't lease it. Right? So she can't be an owner, she can't be a tenant. What does that leave? We were just talking about it a couple of minutes ago. What does that leave?
Licensee.
That is correct. Yes. Kimika, I am saying that to create a legal, a lease at law, that it must be in writing. Yes, that's correct. You may have an equitable lease without a writing, but that's beyond the scope of this conversation. But to create a tenancy at law, you have to have it has to be reduced to writing. Doesn't have to be a terribly formal writing, but it does have to have a writing. Even a tenancy at will, right, still has to comply with the statute of frauds. So Catherine is a licensee. Okay, what kind of license do we think that she has? Okay, let's back the question up a little bit. What are the 4 types of licenses that we talked about on Thursday? Okay, so Kimika says that it's a contractual license because she's performing services in exchange for her permission to occupy. I think that's a reasonable argument, okay? And obviously, as Kimika has pointed out, a contractual license is one of the 4 types of licenses, okay? Does anybody want to make an argument that there's another type of license going on here? So what are the other 3 types of licenses, right? There's a bare license where there's no contractual agreement. There's a license by estoppel, okay, which has the general estoppel requirements of a promise, reliance, and detriment. And there's a license consequent to interest, which requires there to be an interest in land, a non-possessory interest in land, okay? So we know, right, we've already established that Catherine has no interest in the land, so her license can't be consequent to an interest. We know that she's offering something valuable in exchange for her license, so it can't be a bare license. But let's talk about the estoppel. Okay. Do we have a promise?
Yes, he promised her that she can stay on the land for as long as she wished once she performed her services.
Exactly. Okay. Do we have reliance? Jessica, you're muted.
I would say yes, because we saw in the facts that she had repaired some stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, she certainly relied on it, right? She moved in.
And she left the job.
And there's our detriment. She left the job. She took a pay cut. It's not clear, how much the pay cut was, but she clearly took a pay cut. And there's your detriment. So we have so we could argue either a contractual license or a license by estoppel. Given the fact pattern, which of those do you think is better for Catherine. And the key piece of this, right, the fact that sort of twists this for you is that Tom isn't the one throwing her out. Jim is. So, what contract does she have with Jim? None, exactly.
She doesn't.
Yep, no. Kimiko beat you to it by about half a second. And no, there's no contract. What promise did Jim make to her?
That she would stay as long as she wants.
What promise did Jim make to her?
Oh, Jim is the second person?
Yep,
No, he didn't promise her anything.
exactly. So equity is going to look at this and go, we're not convinced that there's anything here for us to act on. Equity is going to say, that was exactly what I was going to say, Aisha. Equity is going to say, look, you don't really have any rights here. Your license can be revoked at any point, but this would impose a real hardship on you, and so we can require that Jim give you 12 months to find a new place. Right? This is just like the case of the estranged wife who had her soon-to-be ex-husband sell the family home out from under her, right, after he's moved out. So this is the same sort of reasoning. Okay, so that's exactly right, Aisha. Okay. Now we're getting to, who said it? What I just said at the very beginning, okay, which is, what about all this money that she spent on these new installations, the security system, the new windows, whatever else that may not be mentioned in the fact pattern, right? What happens to all of that? Can we come up with an argument that gets her some sort of rights related to that? So this piece of the puzzle, I think, is a little more half-baked. Okay, I'm not completely convinced that I buy what I'm going to tell you guys. But if we can come up with an argument that suggests that that Catherine should be granted an equitable lease, then she gets tenants' rights. Then she's entitled to some notice before she can be thrown out. She's entitled to whatever removal rights she has, whether it's under the common law or under the statutory test. But that's the key puzzle. That's the key puzzle in attacking these installations, is how can we get Catherine an equitable lease? Okay. So we don't have a trust. We don't have a contract for a lease. Okay, because as we discussed at the beginning, she doesn't have a writing, so there can't be a contract for a lease. But could we interpret the facts in such a way as to create a lease by estoppel? Okay, so we still have the promise, the reliance, and the detriment. Those don't change. So we still have estoppel, the question is, can we characterize the promise as being a tenancy promise rather than a licensor promise? And I don't have a great answer to that, but I know that that's the question. So that I think is the piece of the puzzle that's missing. So I'm still working on that one. Okay. What questions do you have? What questions? Would we have to determine if the notice to quit would apply to her? I'm going to say no. And the reason I'm going to say no is I'm not, I don't know of anyone in her situation where the notice to quit wouldn't apply. So if you know of something that would sort of complicate that answer, email it to me and we can talk about it. But I don't know of anything where it wouldn't apply. Okay. Does that answer your question? Okay, great. What other questions do we have?
Sir, would we go into the fact about the actual conveyance when it comes as it relates to Tom to Jim? And when you're conveying properties or land, it should be free from all encumbrances. But Tom has gone against that and transferred this property now with a tenant inside. Sorry, with a person occupying the premises. So basically he leaves Jim with the issue of dealing with Catherine.
Yeah. Yeah, and there may be something, if we if the call of the question was for you to advise Jim, then certainly you would want to look at how Tom's actions might run afoul of some duty to warrant clean title.
Yeah.
But what I can tell you, and we'll talk more about this when we talk about registration, I don't know, sometime before the end of the semester. But basically, if we're dealing with someone with a passage of title, if the encumbrance is not marked in the register book, right, in the land registry, doesn't exist as far as we're concerned. The way that registration works is when you register a transfer of title, it wipes out any encumbrances that may have been created that are not in the registry. So if Catherine had gone and filed a caveat that registered her license, then Jim would have taken subject to that. Okay, at least until, at least if the registrar didn't disallow it. Okay. But if she's taken no action to put her license into the chain of title, Jim doesn't have to take any notice of it. Does that answer your question?
Sort of, but remember, she didn't have, there was nothing in writing between her and Tom. So she couldn't register anything because it doesn't exist in
Well,
writing.
that's the fact is that, and this is again something we'll talk about in more detail, but basically there is a way that she could have registered like the fact that the license existed even without a writing, and then the burden would have been on other people to sort of come in and demonstrate that it doesn't actually exist. So the answer to your question, I guess, is sort of twofold, right? The first one is, if the license doesn't exist in such a way that it can be put in the chain of title, then it doesn't matter, right? Jim can do whatever he wants. If it does exist in such a way that it can be put in the chain of title, and Catherine didn't do that, then Jim doesn't have to pay any attention to it and can walk away from it. So does that help now?
Yes, sir.
Great. Okay. What other questions do we have? Okay. Questions going once? Questions going twice? Yeah, go ahead. I'm not sure what you're asking. My best answer is that there are some circumstances where equitable interests, such as those created by investments, can be converted from interests in the property into interests in the purchase money. And that's called overreaching. And we talked about it on Tuesday of last week. So I believe Professor Codolini's book, maybe not, that may be in Professor Owusu's book. Anyway, one of the textbooks talks about overreaching, but basically all it is you have to have a statute that authorizes it, and then you have to comply with the statute. And when that happens, when you have both of those things, then equitable interests in the land are extinguished upon sale, and they're converted into an equitable interest in the purchase money. And so you're, instead of owning 10% of the land, you now own 10% of the purchase money. So does that answer your question? I don't know that it does. Okay. All right. Well, then, unless there's something else, I'm going to let you guys go. So I will see you guys tomorrow and we'll take things up. All right. So take care and bye.